Okay, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome back to the first Coffee with SoFi session for 2020. We've got Florian on the line, and hopefully you can all hear him. Um, like we mentioned in the invite, Karina is away for a couple of weeks, so we've got Florian, and he's our sustainability economist here at thinkstep, and he's going to be our guest speaker for today with session 6, SoFi and the Carbon Disclosure Project.
Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Nathan?
I can hear you. I'm hoping that everyone else can too.
Okay. Well, if you can hear me, then I trust that everybody else can as well. So rock and roll.
Yep, Jane's saying yes, so that's fantastic.
Perfect. Thanks, Jane.
Next slide. First off, welcome back, and I hope you had a great break over the summer. And one of the other things that's been happening over the summer is that over the last month or so, there have been quite a few media outlets, both in New Zealand and internationally, that have been recording or reporting on the CDP disclosures from the 2019 round. They've had slightly different focuses, but this is what we're doing today.
Yeah, so we just thought, I guess a lot of the times the focus of these sessions is tips and tricks on how to use SoFi. And so this time we've taken a slightly different tact, and it's a practical example of how you might use SoFi for something. And in this case, we're focusing on, just very briefly, but we're just highlighting the CDP disclosure, given it's been in the paper recently. So fairly topical.
Yeah. So what is CDP? It's an acronym, and it stands for the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's a non-profit based in the UK that have been around for about 20 years. They're a really financial-driven organisation, so they get asked by investors to report on companies. And in the last 20 years, they've actually managed to crack over 50% of the global market cap. They've got 3 areas of focus for their reporting: climate change, forestry, and water, but we'll be focusing on the climate change one today. And they kind of go about it 2 different ways. They can either ask companies to complete their survey, or a company can proactively pay them a nominal fee and get that disclosure verified by them. And so what they do with the A-list companies, which is the top 2% of their companies that they report on, they highlight them and publish this big list. And so that's what they did a few weeks ago, was the latest A-list, and that's where the little flurry of media has come from. And as well as the big full version, they do have a minimum version of the questionnaire that's also available for companies. It's like a stepping stone, like an introduction to it, but we'll touch on that a bit later.
So what happens basically with the data that CDP collects, and sort of I think we're going to get into a little bit of this later, but the reason why it's particularly important is because CDP then feed that data to all sorts of global ratings agencies. So there's RobecoSAM, there's the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and there's a whole proliferation of rating tools out there, and essentially CDP data feeds into those. And then obviously investors make their decision based on where a company rates according to one of those indices.
So quick outline of the presentation today. I'll touch on what is CDP, how it works, and then how SoFi can help you with your reporting towards them. And CDP themselves talk about some of these benefits of better investor communication, stakeholder communication, risk management. You can kind of cross-report because it links up quite nicely with GRI, benchmarking, improved performance, realized opportunities, and these are all a lot of the same benefits that you already get with SoFi, so it's quite a nice tie-in. They score based on these 4 bands, I guess. So these are where the A grades come from, and that headline back from stuff where 30 of the top NZX 50 companies were awarded an F. That's not necessarily F for failure, it's just a failure to respond. So it's not that everyone's doing really badly, it's just they'd quite like people to give them this data. So yeah, the 4 categories. The process itself, So how do you actually disclose these things? Well, that minimum questionnaire that we were talking about earlier, again, it lays that groundwork, but because it's a simplified version, you don't actually get the public rating. You don't get the F, so you're avoiding any potential negative coverage that way, but you either just get given a private rating internally or it's kept blank publicly. And then the full questionnaire it's conducted online as well, and then CDP sends a link for you to fill out all these sections in the form, and then they grade them, and you get the scores awarded a bit later on. And their scoring system is fully transparent, and you can actually log on to the website and check out exactly how they do things, which includes
So
things
Nathan,
like,
if I were to, I haven't reported to CDP in the past, but it's something that's been on my radar and I'm looking to do it. I guess in that case, I'd be eligible for the minimum questionnaire, given it's my first year reporting. And I sort of want to treat that as a stepping stone to full reporting in the future. How much, given I've got, relatively robust data collection processes going on in the background, how much work do you think it'll take me at a relatively large organization to sort of complete this minimum questionnaire?
given you've got all the data already in SoFi especially, for the minimum one, it's only about half a day's work, so it's not too bad for you to start that process. And then when you want to do the full thing, it is a little bit more work, but it can't be more than a day or two to actually get all this data input into it. Yeah.
And how much do the questions change from year to year? Like if I get the ball rolling this year, is it going to make it easier for me next year?
Absolutely. So they do change a little bit, and they also publish the change logs from year to year. And so I think the last year's one, there was only about a 15% difference. So the vast majority of the work that you do the first time round is still going to be relevant the second time round, and it's just a matter of adding in the changes that you've done internally more than kind of bending to their will, I guess. Yeah,
Gotcha.
so a little bit more about the CDP. So they have 11 modules, kind of similar to the GRI, and these are the 11 topics that everyone has to answer. And then as well as that, they've got 5 groups of 14 sectors. So if you're in one of these sectors, they'll give you special questions to answer specifically, because if you're having general questions, it doesn't really make sense for a cement company to be disclosing the same kind of things as a financial services company.
And so if I'm reporting for the first time though, as part of my minimum questionnaire, I'm not necessarily asked sector-specific questions at that time, am I? That's just for the full disclosure, which might come in the following year. Is that right?
Correct. So the basic one is quite basic. And we've just got a question from Jane. We haven't actually focused on the forests questionnaire. We've just been looking at the climate change one, but we can look into that for you and get back to you on that. So we haven't looked too deep into the water and forestry one.
Yeah, we've just chosen here to focus just on the learnings here, or the lessons will hopefully apply to the other ones as well. But of the 3 questionnaires or the disclosure rounds, the climate change one is by far the one that receives the most responses. So we've just chosen to focus on that.
So now Florian will walk you through the actual process to do it.
Okay, so really quickly, like Nathan alluded to, there has been a bit of a flurry of media coverage lately, and the reason for that is because the results from the 2019 round of CDP have just been published. By the same token, the 2020 round of questions are now out. Now, there isn't necessarily a huge amount of difference between what was required in the 2019 and 2020 editions, which is good. So there's a bit of consistency, which means that once you're up and running, obviously it's going to be more work in the first year getting everything going, but then hopefully should be a relatively seamless process reporting in the future. So basically the 2020 edition is now out. They aren't finalized until March 2020, so next month. So you've got a bit of heads up there. The questions aren't expected to change a huge amount. And then middle of April, the reporting actually opens. So at that time, CDP will either proactively contact your organization or vice versa. You contact CDP and you receive sort of a unique link, and essentially you fill out the information online. The submissions all close on the 29th of July. So yeah, that's still 6 months away. What we'd recommend is, given that the 2020 questionnaire is actually now online and available, is go through that. And you're obviously all SoFi users, so at the same time as you're going through that, keep an eye or have a think about what you're collecting in SoFi and how that data might mesh with what's required for the CDP disclosure. And if there's sort of anything missing, or there's any particular questions that you might not necessarily be collecting the data in the right format in SoFi yet, then now would be the time to sort of set those things up. So that means that going forward, you're going to have it's going to make your job a lot easier. That's not necessarily going to apply, obviously, this year, because presumably, you might already be halfway through a collection period. But going forward, now would be the time to sort of set the groundwork for CDP reporting, particularly with an eye on 2021. So SoFi has actually been a partner of CDP's for, going on 12 years now, and an official software partner from 2013 onwards. And there are a few little perks to that, which we'll just quickly get into now. So basically, your SoFi users, so this is hopefully how SoFi is going to make your CDP reporting job easier. Basically, there's sort of two iterations. You're either a perpetual SoFi customer, in which case you might replicate some of the CDP questions in your SoFi software just by setting up questions like you're already used to. Or if you are a SaaS customer, then there are some CDP reporting templates already available in SoFi. However, I'd probably stress that given you are submitting online via CDP anyway, the difference between these two isn't huge. So the general lessons still apply, really. Basically, this is a sample of what the questionnaire looks like. We've sort of focused on the emissions data, given it's quite pertinent to SoFi, obviously. This is the PDF that I've just downloaded directly from CDP. So if you're filling out the 2020 edition, you're going to see this question. And basically, you can just replicate those exact questions in your SoFi. We sort of recommend you might create reports with particular CDP questions, and that'll mean that then in the future, when you roll these questions over, they're going to be exactly the same. So this is a screenshot from this is from our demo license. This has got the CDP sort of questionnaire set up in it. This is an old edition. It looks like this is from 2018 by the looks. But the key thing here is that once these graphs are set up, then going forward, it's hopefully when the questions don't change too much, it's just a click of the button to get the reports and graphs that you're going to need for the next year's disclosure. And basically what we were saying before, there is an opportunity to sort of roll over reports, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are already aware with SoFi. So it's really as easy as once you've got that groundwork set up, and you've already, especially if you can sort of repurpose some of the answers from the year prior, some things don't necessarily change, management practices, etc., etc. It means that hopefully going forward, it's it really is going to be just a small amount of work in order to get some sort of good publicity with regards to CDP responses.
Sweet, thanks for that, Flo. And as always, we're keeping on with the takeaway theme from last year. And the two takeaways from this session are definitely start that process early. Like Flo was talking about, the questionnaire is already essentially out there. So have a look through and see how your data that you're already collecting is going to slot into that quite nicely. And then secondly, actually just use SoFi to help make that reporting easy. So yeah, thanks very much. Are there any other questions that people have? Just type them in the box and we can get to them. And if you have any more detailed questions, when Karina gets back, she's the team lead for the SoFi team, and you've all got her contact details. So if there aren't any other questions, we'll just say thanks very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this first session back, and we'll see you next month.
Cool. No, thank you very much. Hopefully we encourage everybody to sort of get amongst the CDP reporting. Yeah, like we said, once you've done it once, it's going to be a lot easier the next time around. But even in the first instance, with the minimum questionnaire, it should it's not really too difficult to get the ball rolling on that.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.